She was from Sweden, she was a law student, and we were so stupidly in love with each other, and we were going to get married. But when I was in Italy, she was in a friend's car in England, and she was killed in a car crash. And when I received the news of her death, I didn't handle it very well at all. I really got very depressed, and I just really wished I could have died with her. I just found myself just really hating my life, and I began to develop a hatred for other people. And my depression quickly turned into aggression. And I just remember myself, just that first occasion, exploding when somebody upset me in the smallest way. If somebody looked at me in a way that disagreed or said something out of place, I would be so twisted and spiteful. I would just provoke a fight immediately. I remember one occasion in a shop, somebody just probably looked at me funny. I'm really not sure anymore if they did. All I know is that I was upset with them. And I said something rude. I swore a foul word at them. And of course they said something back, and immediately I proceeded to just rear in their face. And really, as I say, I was nothing more than a coward, because I knew I was beating on somebody that could not defend themselves against me. I brought this filthy attitude with me into the workplace. And if somebody came so much as one step too close to my boss, I would pin them to the ground, and I would really cause them permanent damage in their face. I just began to get more and more aggressive and really sickening. I was so pathetic. And noticing the change in my behavior, a radical change in my behavior, it wasn't long before Amin asked me again to collect money for him. And this time I agreed. And I now began to go to people's homes and businesses, and I would find these individuals that owed him this money, and I would treat them like animals. I'll hunt them down like animals. And I'll always come away with the money, and I'll always leave them with some damage in their face. I'd always make a point of doing that. It was like a trademark. And I'm so ashamed of that. In the line of, basically, I probably broke more arms and legs and jaws and backs than I care to recount to you fine people this evening. And I really wish to God I could turn back my clock. But it's too late for that. In the line of duty as a bodyguard, I killed people unnecessarily. There are times when we were on many trips to the Middle East, and Amin had many enemies. And I wouldn't, instead of shooting somebody in their shoulder or their leg to disarm them, instead I would shoot to kill. I would shoot them straight in the face, and I took life, and I didn't feel guilt or shame. I just hated this whole world. If there was a button I could press to explode the world, I would, because I just wasn't handling the death of Aya very well at all. I just developed this rage and this hatred. I can't really, it's hard to explain it to you, because I was a very different person then. I was now doing more and more debt collection for Amin, and we finally transferred from Italy to the consulate in Cyprus, where now Amin was coming to the end of his time with the government. Now he was really focusing most of his time on private business. And now I was his full-time debt collector. I wasn't on his close protection unit anymore. And there was at one point when my parents asked me if I would help them with some money. I would always help them financially, but they asked me if I could help them with this one particular trial procedure that they'd heard of. My father heard of multiple sclerosis sufferers which were going into these pressure chambers in Switzerland, and many of them were seeing a remission in their illness. Well, they wanted to give this trial procedure a go. They always wanted to try everything, of course, always looking for a cure. They never found one. Well, I was earning such a lot of money, and that's the reason why they asked me, and I would have loved to have given them money, but I agreed to give it to them, but I didn't have that money on me. I was living the life of such an idiot and such a loser. I was so wasteful and extravagant and irresponsible. I just didn't have that sort of money on me anymore. I was always the big shot, buying the big presents for everybody, and I was just such an arrogant fool. But I thought to myself I would take extra money from the people I'm collecting debts from. There was one person I was collecting a debt from that was living in the Hilton in Nicosia. And I knew what he looked like, and I knew his name. I knew where he was living. And I was following this man, and all I could see really was the back of his head. I didn't know him personally, but as I was looking at his head, I was just hating every single part of him. And I followed him to his room, and I just was thinking about all the things I would do to him, and I forced my way into his room, and I left him in a very bad way. And I then, like a common thief, began to steal all of his money that he had in drawers or wardrobes or luggage. I stole the money that he owed to my boss and a little extra as well that I was going to give to my parents. But it wasn't enough. And so I then began to break into virtually every room on the floor. And I would force my way into the rooms, and if anybody was in one of those rooms, it was really not good for them. And I would, as I say, do this robbery and this stealing. I was so pathetic. I finally got the money that my parents needed, and I gave that to them. And it was not long after this that the police in Cyprus finally caught up with me, thank goodness. But I don't know where this would have ended. Now, when the police arrested me, well, I was fully familiar with interrogation procedures. And I was going to play it real cold and real cool. I was not going to say very much at all. And as soon as they would let me go, I would basically get a flight and leave the country. But I broke so many laws, in fact international laws, they really had no intention of letting me go. When the police arrested me, they were being so stupid with me. There was mainly two of them which were talking to me all the time. They had me handcuffed, and one was offering me little cigarettes and little coffees, and the other one was shouting his head off at me. And I was being really obnoxious and rude to them, so I really deserved all I got. They should have just shot me anyway. That's basically, this one guy, he was being so nasty and he was upsetting me, and he then gave me this almighty slap in my face. And you see, nobody really slapped me in my face in those days. And I really got so upset. I kicked him in his head, and it was almost funny because he nearly flew halfway across the room. It was only a small room, but I nearly killed him. And as soon as I hit this one Greek CID officer, they realized what they were dealing with. And they started shouting for help, and all these policemen ran into this small little room. It was really funny. I mean, there must have been hundreds of them in there, in this small little room, and they were shouting their heads off at me in Greek, and they beat me so well that day. I really got what I deserved. All of them. They just pounded into me, and they then began to shackle my legs to my handcuffs. And then every day and night, especially in the evening at 10 o'clock, they'll take me to the offices upstairs, and they would beat me in so many different ways. They did something to me called al bastanando, where they sit you in a wooden chair and they put your feet through the holes of another wooden chair. They sit on your legs and they handcuff you behind your back. And I mean, please do not feel sorry for me, because I should have been beaten all over anyway. But they would beat the soles of my feet, and they would beat me. And I don't want to sound arrogant here, but it didn't really hurt me at all in the very beginning. But they did it every single day and night, and they would always put my feet into cold water to stop the bruising. But I tell you, they did it so long that my back was beginning to hurt me. They were really bashing me in so badly. And in the end, I admitted to crimes I'd done and crimes I hadn't done, all to do with robbery and violent crime. In the end, they gave me 3 years in Nicosia Central Prison. And, well, that was interesting when they tried to take me there. The prison, to describe it to you very quickly, is right in the middle of this divided island. Many of you will know that the north part is occupied by the Turkish and the southern part by the Greeks. And the prison is right in the middle of this divided island. The prison's partly built by the Greeks, partly built by the Turkish, and part of it is actually built by the British Army. And because of overpopulation, I sort of fell into the Turkish part of the prison. This was really more like a dungeon than a prison. There was no segregation. Everybody was literally mixed together. Murderers and thieves and pedophiles and terrorists and rapists and whatever else you can possibly imagine that somebody can commit to be in prison, we were all mixed together. The only attempt of segregation was a separate block that had men that committed some pretty peculiar crimes. They had mental illness, and they were always given Valium tablets to keep them sedated. They could get drugs very easily, and you could always tell which ones were those guys there. And their gate was always open, and they could walk anywhere in the prison. And they'll walk around with blades that they'll break out the Gillette that you'll shave with, or they'll have makeshift knives that they'll make with a blade and a pen, and they'll walk past you and cut you or stab you for nothing more than a cigarette butt. In this place, every month, men would get very badly beaten up or cut up or gang raped or even killed, sometimes for no reason. On the first day they tried to put me in there was on Christmas Eve. This was the worst Christmas of my life. And they tried to put me in this small little cell. There were 7 bunk beds, and I was the 14th man they were going to put in that cell. And as these 2 guards were unchaining my shackles, I looked around that cell, and there is no force on God's earth that would have put me in there. Because everything that you can imagine that one man can actually do to another man was happening in there. And as soon as they unchained me, I decided I've had enough and I'm going home. Stuff this. And I turned around and I was walking off. I didn't know what I was thinking because I wasn't going to go anywhere. And these 2 guards, they tried to restrain me, and they were just doing their job, these 2 poor guards. But I reckon I broke every finger and hand and arm that they had. And I turned around a second time to walk off, and then one of the prisoners inside the cell, he yelled something at me. I don't remember what it was. I'm sure he swore at me or something like this. And it really wound me up so much, and I went back into the cell and I grabbed him by his head and I began to smash his head into the floor. I wanted to crack his head open, and I didn't like the look of any one of those guys in there, and I proceeded to attack all of them in there. And I really lost the plot. I was not just hitting the guys, but the walls and the floors and everything. And somebody raised the alarm in the prison, and then all these guards rushed into my cell. I'd been there before, and they surrounded me with guns, and there was probably about 10 of them. Maybe there was a bit less, but it felt like 10 of them around me with guns. And they were stabbing the guns into me, shouting, "Stamada," which means stop in Greek, "We're going to shoot you, you crazy English." And I said to them, well, shoot me. I didn't care less. I wanted them to put a bullet in my head and finish the whole thing. And one of the guards behind me, he bashed the back of his gun on the back of my head to knock me out. Although it didn't knock me out at all, but it really hurt. And then they then dragged me to the solitary confinement block, and my head was really pounding. And they put me in this empty cell. It was a whole block with 2 guys, me and this other guy. He was a Jewish guy. He was in there for his safety because the Palestinian prisoners wanted to kill them just because of their religion and nationality. Well, there I was in this empty cell. Now, really, friends, what do you think I had going for me here? I was really at the bottom of the pit of life. I mean, I didn't find my religion help me in any way at all. As a Buddhist, yes, indeed, when my life was going smoothly, I could sit down and meditate and concentrate and get in touch with myself and find peace in my life. But I tell you now, when my life was being tested and I was in this dungeon, I just didn't, my fiancé was dead. I didn't really have the slightest inclination to sit down and meditate. I just didn't feel I had the strength anymore at all. And I guess since that moment, I lost interest in religion altogether. I don't wish to offend any of you, but for me, religion became irrelevant. And I guess I'm still not interested in religion. My martial arts was meant to give me discipline and self-control, and I guess I got to a point in my life where I was completely out of control. The only thing at the time that would get me out of that prison was my ability to fight. Well, they finally moved me into the main prison, and they put me in this small single cell, which was the size of a small double bed. And I was going to be in there for the rest of the 3 years.